Hi, welcome to Wednesday Stash, where I share ways to help you keep your food for longer. I hope you heard that the music was still on. I'll say it again. Welcome to Wednesday Stash, where I share ways to help you keep your food for longer. Do you suspect, or are you pretty sure that you have home canned foods, jars of home canned foods that have spoiled? So one of your first clues that you might have spoiled home canned foods would be if you had residue or anything on the outside of the jar. Okay, so what you're not going to do is open the jar and taste it to see whether or not it's spoiled. That's a no-no. First thing you can do, check and make sure you still have seals before you open any home canned food. So, do you have a good seal? Is it in place? Is the lid still concave? That indicates that you have a good vacuum. All right? If you have a loose seal, if you notice that there's residue on the outside of the jar, that could be an indication that this jar has been leaking and the contents inside are not safe to consume. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to check your seals. Okay? Make sure you've got good seals in place. Okay? So if you have no streaks, everything is clean, and your seal's in place, and you've followed the correct processing, you're in a good place. Okay? Next thing, check it. Does the color look off? Are you looking at the food and things just inside your jar don't look right? It's not consistent with what you're expecting inside that jar. So if the color is fine, it looks good, that's another indicator that you've got good seals, you've got good color, it looks like what you put in the jar, what you're expecting to eat. Those are things that you're looking at to know, yes, I can safely consume these foods. Or if they're off, that's an indicator of perhaps I should not consume these foods. Okay? Once you open the jar, smell it. Okay? Like I said, don't taste it, smell it. Is the smell off? Is it strange? Is it foul? Is it not consistent with what's inside the jar? When you look in the jar, is there any bubbling? Is there any, things that look amiss? If you see something like this, that's a pretty good indicator something's going on inside the jar. You open it up and there's stuff growing on top. All right? That lets you know that things aren't right. But you don't always have that type of indicator. That it might not be where you have something obvious growing on the top of your jar. So spoilage microorganisms or spoilage microbes, they may give you visual indicators, or they might give you indicators through smell. Like I said, there might be bubbling. But if you have microbes that are growing in that are pathogenic, specifically I'm referring to Clostridium botulinum, spores that have become vegetative and they've produced the toxin that causes botulism, you cannot see that. You're not going to get visual indicators. You're not going to smell that there's something wrong. You're not going to see that there's something wrong, and you're not going to taste that there's something wrong. There might be other things, issues going on where you can taste something, but those things don't have to be in place to say, oh, this doesn't smell right, something's growing in it, this doesn't taste right, that type of thing. You can't tell. So that's why you want to be careful. Now, when you have acidified foods such as this, you're going to be dealing with spoilage microorganisms. Okay? But when you're dealing with low acid foods, meat, fish, poultry, tomatoes, and vegetables, and combinations of those foods, then what you're trying to be careful of is the toxin that causes botulism. So if you suspect that that's what's going on in your jar, in that case, you want to handle these kind of foods very, very carefully. It might be that someone has gifted or you made a food and you processed incorrectly. You thought you had a low acid food. You thought that you could boiling water can it. You've come to find out that no, it should have been processed in a pressure canner. In that case, these types of foods you want to handle carefully. You have a good seal. The seal hasn't broken. Leave it in the seal, and you're going to use trash bags. These are harder to get in than I thought. Okay, so you want a trash bag and another trash bag to go inside of it. And you're going to put the foods that you want to dispose of into the double bag, trash bag, and you're going to throw this away. You're either going to put it in the trash receptacle, or if you're like me and you have to dump your own trash, you're going to take it to the landfill. Okay, so you want to make sure that you bag it in such a way that nobody's going to get into it, and it's going to be safely disposed of. All right, so what if you have foods that are not sealed? You don't have a sealed jar. You know, you see evidence of residue that has been leaking out of the jar, and you suspect that the food, either you know or you suspect the food might be have formed that toxin. So you don't take chances, don't guess, and you're going to handle those foods very carefully. So the first thing you're going to need some rubber gloves, okay? Because what you want to do is you don't want to get anything in a jar that may have that toxin on your hands, in your eyes, in your nose. You don't want to spread this around. The toxin that causes botulism, it can cause it through other ways other than ingesting. You don't have to just eat it. It can get into, if you have open wounds on your hands, or again, like I said, in your eyes or on your nose. So that's where you're going to make sure to limit, you want to avoid any contact with the contents of the jar. So you're going to start with rubber gloves, and after placing those gloves on your hands, you're going to take the jar or jars of suspected food, and you're going to put them into, I'm going to move this out of the way so that you can see, you're going to put these into a pot that on its side, put the entire contents, the jar, the lid, the bands, if bands are on them. And that's why it's a good idea not to store canned food with the bands on, because if the bands are off, sometimes bands can hide that you have a leaking jar. So this way, if you store with the bands off, if you have a bad seal and the jars are leaking, the evidence will be there. But if the bands are on there, everything, just put it into a pot or use your boiling water canner big enough that the entire contents can be submerged, put into the pot. You're going to cover this with at least 1 inch of water, and you're going to boil it for 30 minutes. And what you're doing is you're detoxifying the contents inside the jar, and if something is on the outside of the jar or on the lid. So you're going to detoxify first. After you've allowed this to cool, you're going to, after you've boiled, you've allowed it to cool, then you're going to take that jar and if there are contents inside the pot, if they came out of the jar, everything that's in the pot is going to come out. And again, you're going to use a double-lined plastic bag, and everything, the jar, the contents, of the jar, the lid, all of it go into a double-lined plastic bag. And again, this is going to be disposed of. Okay? Detoxifying it doesn't mean that you want to go ahead and eat it. You just want to detoxify it so that it's safe enough for you to dispose of properly. All right? So, there was, and it seems like it's overkill, like you're doing a whole lot of steps, but botulism is dangerous. It can be deadly. It can cause injury. There was an individual who received home canned carrots, and she opened up the jar and she just tasted one of the carrots. She didn't even swallow the carrot. She just tasted one of the carrots, and she got sick from botulism. It says she spent 11 weeks in the hospital, and the reason she spit it out, she said that it didn't taste right, so she didn't swallow it, which probably saved her life, but still, tasting it was enough to cause her injury. So remember, you can't taste the toxin. Keep that in mind. You cannot taste the toxin. She just said the carrot didn't taste right, and it's probably because the person did not process properly. Instead of pressure canning the carrots, which is what you have to do for a low acid food, low acid vegetable like carrots, the person boiling water canned the carrots. So they were improperly processed. So that's the reason why you're going to go through all the trouble if you suspect or if you know that you have spoiled food, and then especially if it's improperly processed, low acid foods. You're going to go through all of those extra steps. So after you've disposed of, you've bagged everything up, now you have to clean up. Now with cleaning up, you want to clean up all the surfaces, whether it be countertops, anything. Of course, you're going to clean the pot that you canned with. If you had any utensils for any reason that you had to use to help you with this, maybe you used a jar lifter or what have you, you want to sanitize everything in that. So what you're going to do with that to clean your kitchen after the process, you want to use 5 parts of clean water and 1 part of plain unscented bleach. And that's what you're going to use to clean everything that may have come into contact. And then after you've cleaned everything up, you're going to do the same thing again. Okay? 5 parts of bleach, 1 part of water, clean everything that has come into contact. After that, that's when you're going to wash everything. You want to wash all of that after you've detoxified. You've used the sanitizer, not to detoxify, but to sanitize everything. But you still have to wash all of that, wash that up. So that's when you're going to clean your surfaces down. When you put this solution on everything to clean up, that 5-part solution with 1 part water, you're going to put everything, put the solution on. You're going to wait 30 minutes. You're going to just leave the solution there 30 minutes. And like I said, you have to repeat that process. After you've done it, do it again, and then clean. You're going to wash everything up using a detergent. It's a good idea to use paper towels when you're doing your wipe down, and you want to try to keep it as contained as possible. Again, you don't want to spread this everywhere. Use paper towels because you can dispose of the paper towels. And after you've cleaned, you've wiped everything up, you've washed everything down, the last thing you're going to get rid of are the gloves. So these are going to get disposed of as well, because it's just not worth it to keep the gloves that you use to clean up with just in case. You want to avoid the risk of potentially being exposed to botulinum toxin. Okay? So after you clean all of your surfaces, then you're good to go. Now, I hope you never have to clean up, food dispose of jars and then have to clean up because you suspect botulism toxin in food. But if you do, you know how to properly do it. And the directions, the complete directions for doing this, you can find this at the National Center for Home Food Preservation's website. And they explain exactly how you can do it. It's all written out for you. Okay? The next thing I'd like to talk to you about, and I don't have a jar of it. I didn't can corn this year. I wish I had. But I wanted to talk to you in honor of Black History Month. I wanted to talk to you about another food that I hope never goes bad in your pantry. But it's a very popular food, and it's a very popular food to be canned, and that's corn. So corn has been around, obviously, a long time. It was domesticated in Mexico thousands of years ago, and it is a staple that's utilized all over the world. It is grown more than any other grain, and the United States grows more corn than anywhere else in the world. We use it we eat it, we feed animals, we drink it. There are people who know how corn is consumed as a beverage. And we make biofuel. We run vehicles and equipment with corn. It's a huge commodity. It's a big crop here. It was introduced to the people of West and Central Africa by the Portuguese, according to Professor Frederick Opie of Babson College. When black people were brought to the Americas, corn became a fundamental food source. Foods like hoe cakes, cornbread, ash cakes. Ash cakes were cornmeal that was mixed with water and literally cooked over ashes. So that's why it was called the ash cake. But these foods were used to supplement their diet. Now, some of the most celebrated dishes that we eat now, and think about restaurants, whether it be corn pone, cornbread, shrimp and grits. You can't have grits without corn. Johnny cakes. They all came from very humble beginnings. So with corn is a very popular canned food. It is home canned corn is best. The best way to do it, you're going to select slightly immature to just ripe corn. That's ideal. You're going to remove the silt, wash and blanch the corn for 3 minutes, and then cut it away from the cob 3/4 of the way. You're not going to cut all the way to the cob. You're going to go 3/4 of the way, and you do not scrape the cob. And, if you've ever made fried corn, that's one of the things. You cut all the corn off of the cob, and then you scrape the cob that goes into the fried corn. When you're canning, you don't do that. Okay? So, after you've removed the kernels from the corn, you're going to, and you've blanched it for 3 minutes, that's the preferred way to do it is to have a hot pack. And for your hot pack, you're going to have, for each quart of corn kettles, you need 1 cup of hot water. You're going to add the water and the corn together, and you're going to simmer it for 5 minutes. And you can add salt. Now, for each quart of corn, you need a cup of water. You do not want to pack it any more tightly than that, because like I explained last week, you have some vegetables that expand during processing, and corn is one of those vegetables. So if you have too much corn in the jar, that corn's going to expand, and you're going to have it could interfere with your seal, or you don't have enough liquid in the jar, so you have corn that's exposed, it's not covered by liquid, and it changes color on you. Those are all quality issues you want to process correctly. But to make sure that you do not interfere with the seal, which would be a food safety issue, or have corn that's not completely covered with liquid, which would be food quality, you want just follow the tested recipe. And again, you can find that tested recipe at the National Center for Home Food Preservation site, and just follow the directions for properly preparing the corn. The preferred pack is going to be a hot pack, although you can do a cold pack with it, but it's better to do with a hot pack. You're not going to over pack your jar. And then for processing, for a pint size, corn takes 55 minutes to process at 10 pounds of pressure if you're at below 1,000 foot altitude. And I'm looking for my other jar, and I put it in the plastic bag. If you have a quart jar is going to take 85 minutes to process, depending again on your altitude. So check out if you're interested in canning corn, because you might come across a lot of corn that when this next season comes up, and canned corn is great in a ton of dishes. You can use it in soup. I love to use canned corn in cornbread batter. You just add some of the corn to the cornbread batter. Very, very good. But you can use it for salads, side dish. You have a lot of options. So that's it for this week's Wednesday Stash. Next week, I'm going to talk about home food preservation options. So canning is definitely an option, but there are other ways to home preserve foods, and I'm going to discuss the different options you have for preserving foods. So that's it for this week's Wednesday Stash. If you don't already like the Safe Plates Food Safety Information Centers, if you don't like us already, just go ahead and like us. You'll get the announcements, and then this way you'll get a heads up for whenever we're presenting anything. You'll get the reminders for Wednesday Stash, and if you like the video, go ahead and like the video. But that's it for now. Thanks. Bye.